Ready for our show tomorrow at 3 o'clock on the 14th. It's going to be down here by the creek behind our house. We are looking forward to God giving us a really warm day and friendly and sweet fellowship. So if any of you are unsure about what it's going to be about, it's going to be three bands with different styles. One's going to be a heavy rock style, another one's going to be like a fun rock, and then the other one's going to be more of an intense worship, a heavier, harder sound. A little screaming, not a lot, but it's worship. It's the scriptures being sung and proclaimed, just kind of like if you've watched me preach, you know there's times when I get really intense. There's times when I actually elevate my voice to the level of a scream. And God gave us that. God gave us the whole thing. He didn't just give us sweet talk, nice talk, whisper talk. He gave us the whole breadth of human emotion. It's all built up in us. When you go to war, you don't go to war, just real loosey-goosey. You go with intensity. You go with passion and zeal. You go charging ahead. You rally the troops, and you're determined to win the war. And I believe that strong worship fits our time. Our time is a time where things have gone really bad for the church. We're very divided and we're very separated. Our doctrine is not clear. People are not walking the walk. Leaders are not leading. Shepherds are not shepherding. Prophets are not prophesying. Apostles are not laying their lives down and planting and sending the next generation leaders. They're not imparting themselves. And we are at a season where we need something strong. We need something intense. It fits our time. And there are times when God draws so close that we just, after the war, we just want to lay down and rest. And we get music like that's softer and sweeter and elevating. It's high notes, soprano. And it's just very soft and very sweet. And that God's in all of it. I was raised in a church where hymns were the thing that we sang, the traditional hymns, not your southern hymns, as I've learned that there's different hymn books. But what we were trained in was the Puritans and the early church father hymns. And those hymns, some hit us really hard. A mighty fortress is our God, a bulwark never failing. The church is one foundation. These things are things that you would preach, and you'd have a big pipe organ, and you'd have a drum beat, and you'd have cymbals clashing together, and they would declare that Jesus Christ is Lord of his church, and that his church will never fail. It will never be wiped out by Satan and his enemies. Martin Luther was the one that loved music, and he loved all kinds of worship. And then you had John Calvin, who was more into just a cappella worship. And those two camps are still here today. It's not worth it for us to separate. It's just worth it for us to love one another and understand one another. And that will never happen if you are just sitting there with your camp of people agreeing with yourself. You need to be challenged. I needed to be challenged. All I ever knew was hymns. And then God started to give me a little taste of guys who, in a contemporary way, sang hymns like Fernando Ortega. Steve Camp, he was very passionate about the Bible and the truth. And he brought rock and roll to the truth. Phil Keaggy, beautiful guitar player, singing beautiful poems from the past and making them sound good and connected with my heart. That's what our forefathers did. They wanted to connect with the people of their time and their culture. I don't know why we've lost that. We got to get it back. Old is not better. The ancient landmarks are what we're recovering. And those landmarks are methods. Knowing how, by the wisdom of God, the impartation of God's knowledge, to know how to reach our generation. And I just pray for some of you who are older, it's time for you to change. I had to change, and you can change too. Don't give up on this rising generation just because of the way they look, even if they seem flighty to you. They don't have a good work ethic. How are they going to know unless you show them? It's your responsibility to change. They are just the kids. You've got to pastor and father and shepherd this next generation. That's a strong word of encouragement and exhortation, and it's for you. Don't let this slide by and go through one ear and out the other. Know that God wants you to enter into this season with your military readiness, with a heart that has been prepared by your worship and your prayers, and you have laid the groundwork for doing something, not sitting and discussing like the old senators in the Roman Empire. All they did was sit around and figure out how to manage the people, to govern the people, and write bills and laws, and just keep the people at peace, and whether they go to war or not. Get involved with Jesus Christ. Get involved with his kingdom. I'm going to preach today on how Jesus launched people to preach his message, and the way we got to look at that launch. How we approach that launch is very important. I'm going to reposition myself sitting here by the creek. I thought it was so pretty. Luke chapter 9, we have the experience of Peter, James, and John seeing the glory of the Lord just after he has told them that his one main purpose in his public ministry is to go to Jerusalem and die. And then he tells his disciples, those who are listening to him, to take up their crosses, deny themselves, and follow him. Then he tells them also to lose their lives, to not attempt to save their life. And for Peter, James, and John, that meant no more fishing business, no more lifestyle like they used to have. They were going to enter into a completely different kind of life, a faith life. I have had to go through this process with the Lord over the last couple or so years. It is almost like the Lord is taking that 3-year time frame that he had with his disciples, and he's been training on himself and his. If I did not have this time, if I was not tested by my Jesus, I would not be preaching by this river or this creek. I would not have the passion and the zeal. I would not have the faith. I would not have the love. My furnace would not be as hot. My affection for God would not be as intense. So the very thing, if some of you want to be preachers and you say, I would want to be a minister for God, I feel called, I feel like God is dealing with me to separate me. It's not fame and fortune. It is separation, it is isolation, and it is preparation. That's the process. And that's what Peter, James, and John have just gone through. They had to deal with the fact that they lost everything that they had. They lost their life. They didn't lose their family, but their family was going to have to deal with them traveling and moving about, and then eventually being persecuted after Jesus died, rose again, and ascended on high with his Father and poured out the Pentecostal wind of the Spirit. Then the Mount of Transfiguration. The glory of Christ is seen, just 3, and they are commanded not to tell anyone what they saw. Now, you can't even imagine what that's like. That'd be like you had a private mission to go to the moon. It was all just you and maybe 10 other people, and you had a rocket, you had a navigation team, and you had the ship, and everything worked. You were able to get to the moon, be able to get out of the ship, you were able to walk about, get back on the ship, and come back down into Earth's atmosphere and walk again on planet Earth like everybody else. And then you were told not to tell anybody. That had to be hard, but they did that. And then they faced this demoniac spirit. In Luke, it says a father brought his son who was convulsed with an evil spirit to Jesus. And listen what Jesus says in verse 41. He says, he answered and said, O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you and bear with you? Bring your son here. O faithless and perverse generation, how long will the Lord